Hey Algebra 2, we are starting chapter 7. We're going to do 7.1, Trigonometric Functions and Acute Angles. So right now we're going to start with trig ratios. You do know some of them in geometry. Oops, don't know why I threw one in there. Trig ratios. Okay, so before we talk about trig ratios, let's make a right triangle. I'm going to label our sides as well. So, we need a straight edge. This. Okay, so anytime we make a right triangle, you always need to label your right angle. And then I'm going to have this be the angle theta that we're focusing on. So if this is theta, then the important things you need to remember are this side across from it, like it's pointing, if you drew an arrow, is the opposite side. And the side that's directly next to it is the adjacent side. The side of the leg of the triangle that's across from 90 is always your hypotenuse. Okay, so there are 6 basic trig functions of an angle. There are 6 basic trig functions. Angle theta. Right? And then if this were an angle, this would still be the hypotenuse, but this would be opposite and this would be adjacent. Okay, so you know 3 of them, right? You know, or you should know, sine. And in your calculator, it is written sin. So sine of theta is equal to the opposite side over the hypotenuse. Then we have cosine, which is cos of theta, and that is adjacent over hypotenuse. And then we have tangent, which is tan theta, and that is opposite over adjacent. Alright, so there's 3 more. The reciprocal functions are what they're called. So these are your 3 that you're familiar with, and then we have the reciprocal . The reciprocal trig functions of angle theta are formed by exchanging terms of each ratio. Alright, so the reciprocal function for sine is called cosecant. It is denoted CSC of theta. And it's going to be the reciprocal of this. So it's hypotenuse over opposite. Hence why it's called reciprocal function, right? Because it's the reciprocal of the fraction. Okay, so then the reciprocal of cosine is called secant. And it's SEC of theta. And that is going to be hypotenuse over adjacent. And then finally, the reciprocal of tangent is cotangent. And it's written COT of theta. And that will be adjacent over opposite. Okay, so those are the six trig ratios. You're familiar with 3 of them. You know SOHCAHTOA. And then these are the reciprocal functions. So let's do an example using it. We'll start off straightforward and say, write the 6 trig ratios. And I'll give you a triangle, so let's make a right triangle. This is our right angle, and then I would like this to be the angle we focus on. And this side length is 12, this side length is 35, and this side length is 37. So the first thing I always recommend doing is labeling what side is your opposite side, what side is adjacent, what side is hypotenuse. So if this is theta, then this is going to be the opposite side. This 35 is going to be the adjacent side, and this is the hypotenuse. I think it's really helpful to label your the sides so that you don't mix things up. Now you want to try to have these memorized. Obviously you don't. You're probably learning it for the very first time right now. But let's solve for the 6 trig ratios. So this one is straightforward because we're given all sides. You don't have to solve. So sine of theta is equal to opposite, right, over hypotenuse, so 12 over 37. So I think it's helpful to start with what you guys know and love. Maybe not love, but you know it. So SOHCAHTOA, sine, cosine, and tangent. Okay, so cosine, if you want, you could write out SOHCAHTOA to remind yourself. Right? So cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. And then tangent is opposite over adjacent, so 12 over 35. And we can't reduce any of these, so those are our final trig ratios. We still have 3 more that we need to find, and so I like lining mine up with the reciprocal. So if this is sine, then cosecant is the reciprocal, so that's going to be 37 over 12. And we're going to leave it as an improper fraction. Then we have secant is the reciprocal of cosine, and that's going to be 37 over 35. And cotangent is the reciprocal of tangent, and that's going to be 35 over 12. And that is it. So those are the 6 trig ratios, the definitions, and then applying them. There are other kinds of problems you'll have, and we'll practice that together.